Welcome to Software Heresy video number 7. In this video, we're going to talk about NoEstimates. We'll start with the normal warning. Heresy can be uncomfortable or even a bit insulting. I'm going to be talking about some things that are related to long or deeply held beliefs by many people. And it is in fact my design that these will be uncomfortable or even a bit insulting. Inherently, if we are going to re-examine these sorts of things, that is going to be the result. I do encourage you not to take it personally or not to take it too personally. So, NoEstimates. This is another fun one. If you look around, and especially if you look around in the Agile world, you will find lots of information about estimating and tracking velocity and doing predictions. And here are a few that I went out and found pretty quickly. Some of the basis for using this term velocity, and velocity is just using existing performance and trying to use it to predict future performance. Some of the basis for Agile teams came from lean manufacturing. There's a particular theoretical framework in lean called the theory of constraints. And the theory of constraints uses throughput as a main measurement. So you can think of throughput and velocity pretty much being the same thing. And it's pretty well known that I like the theory of constraints. So that means I must love velocity, right? Well, a little question for you. And I'm going to show you two things, and I want you to tell me how they're different. So here we have a large industrial hydraulic press. I think this is a 30-ton press. So you use it to put materials in, and then you turn on the hydraulics and it stamps them, and you get something more useful than the raw materials out, some sort of formed item. So you do this, use this for like making car bumpers. So this is the kind of thing where lean manufacturing looks at machines like this. Here's the second thing. Here we have a software developer. And the software developer is actually quite a bit different from this machine. And the big important difference is that software developers are self-aware and they have cognitive ability, which means they can look at systems and understand how the systems behave. This machine doesn't care whether you run it, 5 minutes a day or 3 hours a day. Well, it may care from a maintenance perspective, but it doesn't have an inherent feeling. But our software developers are paying attention to a bunch of different things and are very happy to optimize their behavior, sometimes in ways that we don't want. So, looking at NoEstimates, and I have a series of issues related to it. The first thing is that nobody is any good at estimates. I had one team where we did estimates the way you're supposed to in Agile. So story points, planning poker, everyone together. And we devoted quite a bit of time every time we were getting ready to schedule stuff. And then we tracked how much time everything took and compared that to our estimates. And the correlation was laughable. So we would regularly estimate things in a short period of time and have them take much, much longer, and vice versa. And we just weren't very good. Now, we possibly could have gotten better with a lot more investment, but doing things that way, it didn't work. Now, there are some very good teams, and more importantly, teams that work on very small or generally small groups of functionality. And if you do that, you can do some sort of estimates. You can say, hey, in the last week, we completed 7 functional items. And we can say, so in the next week, it's pretty likely that we'll complete 7. Or maybe over the last 6 months, we've completed 7 every week. And that gives us a decent idea. I'm not going to really call that estimating. I think estimate is talking about individual items. So with that exclusion, nobody is really very good at estimates. Issue number 2. And this is, I think, the biggest problem with estimates. So you're a developer. You're not a machine. You're a developer. You're working on a story that was estimated at 5 story points. But as you've gotten into it, you realize that that estimate isn't really very good. It's more complicated than anybody thought, and it's going to take about twice that long. So what are your options? Okay, you can cut scope. And in fact, if you look at most agile methodologies, that's what they say you should do. You should cut scope. You should go and talk with the product owner and say, this is too big. We're going to have to figure out how to cut it apart. The problem with this is, first of all, because these are people, you're making them more work. Okay, so that makes them kind of less happy to see you. And you can't do this very often. You can do this occasionally, but if you do it all the time, it looks like you aren't very good at your job. And generally, that's not a good thing to do. So, cutting scope, we can do it sometimes, but probably not that often. Work harder. You can find a lot of studies that look at working harder in cognitive realms. What I generally have found is that working harder can work in small constraints. So maybe I decide for these 3 days I'm going to take shorter lunches and I'm not going to go hang with my friends and I'm going to stay an hour later. Those sort of things can work in small constrained things. But as a general approach, work harder doesn't work. You may spend more time there at work, but generally you don't get more accomplished. Or finally, you can reduce the amount of work you do. And if you're in an agile team, you have a definition of done. And definition of done says you're done when you do this. Okay, so I can't cut scope. How am I going to reduce the amount of work I do? Well, it's really simple. I'm going to turn up the suck to 11. I'm going to change the things that I can change. And there are 2 big things. The first is I'm going to write fewer tests. I'm going to write the minimum number of tests that I think are possible. Now, maybe I can get writing tests into a different scope. So I write minimal ones, or maybe I just write smaller ones and hope that nobody says anything. But I'm definitely going to write fewer tests, and I'm going to spend much less time thinking about the kind of tests I write. And that'll save me some time. The bigger thing is I'm going to do less refactoring. Because the amount of refactoring that I do is totally dependent on my opinion of what the code needs. So it's really hard for other people in the team to tell that I'm actually doing less refactoring, because they can't tell the difference between code that really needed to be refactored and code that really didn't need to be refactored. And even if they can, they have the same problem that I do. So if they start pointing out cases where I should have refactored, they can count on me pointing out cases where they're behind and they should have refactored. So inherently, because we are people and we respond to incentives, as I have things that take too long, it will tend to push me towards lower quality, fewer tests, less refactoring, accumulation of technical debt. And conversely, when I have things that take less time, I don't actually go and do a better job at these. I just consider, oh, I'm doing great. and I just don't work as hard because I figure I'm working harder in the cases like this. Number 3. This one should seem really obvious, but I notice that a lot of people don't tend to think of this. Everything we do takes time. So we're spending group meetings for estimates. We're tracking progress towards goals. We're discussing progress towards goals. We're discussing changing scope. We're discussing who has their stuff done and when they were supposed to be having it done. All of that is time and effort and attention that isn't spent on developing software. Another way to express this is that estimates at best, or at least these kind of estimates, are means. They're considered to be a means to get the result we want. They are not an end. So we're treating them as if they're an end. They're something that is fundamentally useful on their own, when in fact, at best, they're just a means. None of these activities generate quality code. And in fact, they take time away. So what's my summary on estimates? They take time you could use more effectively for development. They provide incentives to write crappier code and tests. I do have a caveat here. You may need to do some high-level estimates to evaluate cost benefit. So your group is trying to make decisions as to what sort of things they will implement and what sort of things they won't. So what feature areas will customers like and what feature areas will customers not like? And you have to have some way of making these sort of decisions. For that, you probably need some kind of high-level estimate. I typically see these expressed with t-shirt sizes. So this effort is small, medium, large, are ones you usually understand. And then if it's bigger than large, you just throw extra large at it and say, this is a really big deal. We really have low confidence in how long this is going to take. And those sort of estimates work fine because the precision at which you can estimate here with t-shirt sizes isn't any worse than the precision that the group is going to use to evaluate the benefit. Because you can talk about, how good this new thing would be for customers, but you really don't have a great idea of how long or how big the benefit is. So at best you can kind of rank and say this is the top benefit thing. So I do think you often need to do some sort of estimates for that sort of thing, or you might want to. When I say no estimates, I'm really not talking about those. I'm talking about story level, feature level estimates, the ones where you really dig in deep. That completes this little bit of heresy. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you'll come back for the next video.